Story 1. The real show would be around midterms. Donald Trump keeps a lot of the Republican Party in line by threatening to endorse rivals to replace people who will not support his agenda. He has enough of a cult of personality with Republican voters that he can simply say someone needs to be replaced, and they will vote accordingly. Being loyal to him makes their seats safer. There is a lot of doubt whether Vance could remotely rally the same kind of influence with voters. Scared politicians will start infighting like rats on a sinking ship to form power blocks in Trump's absence. Meanwhile, hardcore supporters in the House will likely find themselves on the receiving end of backstabs by establishment conservatives who never liked tolerating the crowd since the Tea Party days. There would likely be a lot of establishment and outsider infighting, similar to what is seen with the Democratic National Committee undermining Mamdani in New York City. Story 2. Historically, when a leader with a strong grip on their followers passes, if the leader has not decided and declared succession, a schism forms as different acolytes vie for the followers, each claiming to be the rightful heir. In this case, there is a clear front-runner, Vance, thanks to constitutional instruction. The challenge is that the passing of Trump would open up opportunities for grift. Vance is ineffective and lacks charisma. Donald Trump Jr. comes across as believing he is a power player on his own merit, but he likely attracts some followers simply due to his name. Elon Musk, as the loudest and most vocal figure, will gather some followers. A dark horse from outside the usual suspects may cause the greatest schism. Trump's celebrity allowed him to engage non-voters, a group that is central to his political power. While there is a chance they become dormant, it is likely that someone ambitious will persuade them and bring them into their fold. Story 3. Peter Thiel has invested a lot of money to get J.D. Vance into the position he is now. People should start taking that seriously. He is not an ordinary political donor looking for favors. He is creating the apparatus to operate a surveillance state, with everyone's data and everyone's dirt. I would assume that Vance takes over as his glove puppet and there are some seriously dark moves afterwards. Story 4. Nobody would believe it, even if it were true, so they would probably end up worshipping the ghost of Donald Trump. Story 5. There wouldn't be one. J.D. Vance takes over and points at the celebrating on the left. The Republican Party machine would keep Donald Trump's base worked up over the lack of humanity the liberals have. They hold memorials and tributes for a year straight into the midterm elections. They dial up the rhetoric that the left will take your guns and destroy your way of life, ensuring the midterm elections go their way. Then it's a 2-year cool down from Donald Trump while trying to convince the base that J.D. Vance is the new Donald Trump. Story 6. We are getting our hopes up. Evil has a way of hanging on. Story 7. You would be surprised. I think a large percentage of Make America Great Again supporters would not actually accept his death and believe he is making a clever strategic move so he can return in the 2036 election due to some fake loophole they read on social media. Story 8. I think a lot of internal conflict happens. Donald Trump is the person who holds that situation together. Story 9. It will be interesting to see how many of them disavow Trumpism. Story 10. Watch this movie, The Death of Stalin. The power struggle will look almost exactly like this. Story 11. J.D. Vance will be a weak leader. The grand old party will break into factions and experience infighting. Story 12. There is no one in the ranks of the grandstanding old pedophiles who could hold the cult together. Vance has all the charisma of swamp discomfort, and people, even in deeply conservative areas of the country, are frustrated with them. That is why they are skipping town halls, and the few who have tried have been practically run out of town. The corrupt fools in the party were willing to support Donald Trump no matter what. It is highly unlikely they will do the same with Vance. In fact, it would not be surprising if Donald Trump passes away, Vance resigns, and they make Mike Johnson president. That conniving individual has more influence than Vance, and he is a religious zealot who believes God speaks to him. This is exactly the kind of extremism that the Heritage Foundation wants to implement their version of theocratic control. Story 13. Just Dance will take over, undo some of the extremely unpopular executive orders, but extend the less well-known assaults on checks and balances, Federal Reserve independence, and related areas. Story 14. If Democrats want to gain any control of this narrative, they should be fighting fire with fire. They should be shouting that Vance is trying to kill Trump to take his spot from the rooftops. Then, when he inevitably dies, they can continue to claim he had Trump killed to sow as much division among Make America Great Again supporters as possible to weaken his grip on power. Vance will not inherit his cult of personality. Story 15. Vance would take over and continue advancing former President Donald Trump's agenda. Story 16. It would be like the death of Stalin. Many ineffective politicians pretending to be devastated by a loss while trying to position themselves behind the scenes. Probably much less violence. Story 17. They will tear each other into pieces. Jesus Christ, this will be fun. Story 18. Nothing, it would be a feeding frenzy. Because, just like with Adolf Hitler, the person at the top is whom the cultists put their faith in. The second and third in command are parasites, leeching off the main leader. The faction will splinter and fail anyway, but it would happen faster. Story 19. Imagine a room full of monkeys throwing objects at each other. That is what it will look like. Story 20. Stephen Miller and Project 2025 architects, Vaught and Antony, along with the Heritage Foundation, will ascend. Immigration and customs enforcement and immigrant removal will continue. More election rigging and more closed doors. Story 21. They would not have a puppet to take the blame. The Republican Party is the disease. Donald Trump is a symptom. They allow him to be a buffoon and rally the troops who are as evil and racist as he is, now openly. However, Donald Trump is too dumb to think of these atrocities himself. It's all the Republican Party. Someone will have to step up to be the new Hitler. It will not be Vance. Story 22. Just need to spread the rumor that Vance had him killed and watch with popcorn. Story 23. Have you ever seen a group of monkeys fighting over something? One grabs it and runs off, only to have another grab it and run in the opposite direction. This repeats until they are all yelling and throwing objects. In the end, nothing is accomplished. Whatever they were trying to get is completely destroyed, and everything is generally worse. It is like that, but less intelligent. Story 24. One thing I have not heard anyone speculate about is his estate. This year, he has finally become as rich as he brags, but he is a malignant narcissist. Is he even capable of reckoning with his own demise and choosing a worthy successor? Keep in mind, he does not respect or love Ivanka. She is merely his most prized possession. He has the Trump coin money, the Donald J. Trump stock, hundreds of millions in bonds that he is trying to revalue by restructuring the Federal Reserve. The Super Political Action Committee money probably is not technically his, but that does not seem to have stopped them from spending it however they please, plus an unknown amount in kickbacks. So the children and Vance will fight over the money. Hopefully that will keep those funds from being spent on oppressing us. Story 25. Trump gone would not end the cult. It would just mutate. The grand old party would market a new mascot, spin his myth into scripture, and fundraise nonstop. The fight would not be over who leads, but who best channels the ghost of Trump into votes and outrage. The real power struggle would be between his imitators, each claiming the truest inheritance. Story 26. Probably like how his children are going to react when everyone is in court using up court time fighting over his money, which it turns out he does not really have because he is in so much debt. Story 27. Short-term chaos while everyone scrambles for two assets. The small donor machine and the megaphone to his base. Family brand versus Make America Great Again media versus a few governors. Ending in a bruising primary and a continuity candidate. Whoever gets the email list wins. Story 28. The issue is that every one of the sycophants surrounding Donald Trump considers themselves the obvious successor. They view their current actions as paying dues to earn the position when the time comes. I do not see Marco Rubio, Gary Johnson, J.D. Vance, Ted Cruz, Greg Abbott, or even now disgraced former supporters like Lindsey Graham and Ron DeSantis stepping aside to support someone else in that role. There are women who belong on that list, but realistically, no female candidate has a chance of leading today's Republican Party. Even non-politicians like Donald Trump Jr. and Stephen Miller will throw their hats into the ring. No candidate will reach 15% support until the convention, at which point the party will settle on someone appealing mainly to their own small faction. Some failed candidates will join the ticket through voter support, while one or two others will split the Make America Great Again vote with write-in or third-party campaigns. The Republican tendency to vote against anyone with a Democrat affiliation means this divided party cannot be dismissed outright. But unless the Democrats nominate an unappealing corporate-backed candidate again, the odds favor a Democratic victory. Story 29. They would never admit he is dead. They would keep him alive as long as possible. They would also attempt to use supporters of Make America Great Again to continue threatening and harassing people who disagree with them. Do not underestimate the members of his staff. They have learned from years of watching Donald Trump use threats, intimidation, and blackmail to get what he wants, and they are likely very familiar with these techniques. Story 30. Don Jr. isn't just going to fade into the background quietly. My guess is that he does everything he can to undermine Vance, working along with Stephen Miller. Story 31. They will have a conspiracy theory about the left killing him because an approximately 80-year-old out-of-shape man dying is very suspicious. Story 32. J.D. Vance takes over and faces strong opposition from the Make America Great Again supporters and everyone opposed to Donald Trump because he is not Trump. J.D. Vance has significant flaws but is not as problematic as Donald Trump. He will not be able to handle the pressure. He is a weak leader, which is why Donald Trump chose him in the first place. Story 33. Stephen Miller tries to use Vance as his pawn, but Vance is already loyal to Peter Thiel and cannot have two masters, so he discharges Miller. Miller becomes extremely angry and does everything he can to undermine Vance and his allies. All of the other supporters of former President Donald Trump engage in a Game of Thrones-style struggle for power, taking each other down one by one. The Republican Party will need a major reformation. Story 34. It's a cult of personality, and that always suffers when the personality dies. Donald Trump has a very specific skill set. He can read a room and see what is resonating, and he has absolutely zero convictions about anything other than his own personal advancement. He can pivot all of his positions on a dime if he believes that will have the best impact in the moment. He can take both sides of an issue in the same speech and confidently articulate both as the only correct position. Marco Rubio knows too much about how things actually work to pander that hard. Ron DeSantis has too much pride to abandon his own ideas and chase the crowd the way Donald Trump does. J.D. Vance lacks a moral compass and will adopt whatever he needs to, but his negative charisma will keep him from maintaining support for Make America Great Again. Story 35. If Donald Trump were suddenly gone, the grand old party would likely face a quick leadership scramble, with multiple candidates competing, balancing traditional conservatives, populists, and moderates to define the party's future direction. Story 36. We don't know, and you shouldn't trust anyone who tells you with certainty what is going to happen. Vance would be president, of course, but he doesn't have the charisma to hold the Republican Party under his control, so he would be in a struggle with the various inter-party factions. It's possible we would see a rally around the flag effect, and Vance would get less pushback. Or Marjorie Taylor Greene will declare him the Antichrist in a vision. You can see the issue, I hope. Things like this are very complex already. Plus, the people involved are largely nuts. So hard to say. We would all be finding out at the same time. Story 37. If Donald Trump were to pass from the scene today, his rogues and retainers would not dissolve like smoke. They would scramble like jackals over the carcass of his power. A man such as Trump is not merely a politician, he is a banner. To his followers, he is not flesh and blood but symbol. Symbols do not die so easily. In the sudden vacuum, a contest most unseemly would arise. Those closest to him, family foremost, would proclaim themselves heirs to his mantle. His daughter, polished and poised, would present the image of continuity with softer edges. His sons, truculent and belligerent, would clamor for vengeance, brandishing their father's name as a cudgel. Meanwhile, the flatterers, sycophants, and opportunists who built their fortunes on his shadow, governors, senators, peddlers of falsehood, would sharpen their knives, each seeking to crown themselves the true custodian of Trump's legacy. The movement would fracture. Some would rush headlong into extremity, turning grief into fury, demanding ever more radical defiance of law and institution. Others, slyer and more calculating, would cloak themselves in patriotism, speaking of healing and honoring his vision while pursuing power by subtler means. Yet, and mark this well, without Trump's singular magnetism, the glue would weaken. Rivalries would fester. The rogues who once marched in step to his drumbeat would find themselves in a quarrelsome parade, each claiming to be the truest voice of the fallen chieftain. For America, this would not be peace nor instant deliverance. The battle would move from a single figure to a swarm. In the noise, the republic itself would be tested, whether its people will allow demagogues to bicker over the crown of a dead king or remember that in a democracy, the crown belongs not to a man but to the people alone. Story 38. Make America Great Again ends with Donald Trump, but more sinister forces will attempt to continue what he started. However, they will struggle because they are all incompetent. Story 39. People are missing the very first part of that power struggle. Yes, the order of succession is solidly established, but it is just a list of who becomes president if everyone ahead of them cannot take the role. It is not a situation where each person on the list moves up one spot. So if former President Donald Trump vacates the office for whatever reason, J.D. Vance would be sworn in, and then one of his first acts would be to nominate a new vice president. Congress would have to approve that nomination. That would likely be the first test of his ability to lead, and it is likely his first nomination would be denied. How many tries did it take them to pick a Speaker of the House? This would be much more contentious. Whoever Congress approves could be president a few moments after being sworn in. It is not a decision to take lightly. Story 40. That is why the Republican Party worked hard to corrupt the process to enable themselves to steal elections. They know they are not popular enough to win by actual merit. Story 41. I think Miller is determined enough to do whatever is needed to take power. However, there will not be anyone else on the right who will command the support that Donald Trump has. Story 42. If Donald Trump died, then the situation would become chaotic because no one has any respect for John David Vance. Story 43. Trump is the only thing holding them together at this point. He is their party. It is because of his following, and without him there is no support. They have invested everything in this elderly, unhealthy individual. When Trump dies, the whole thing collapses. We can only hope that he does not complete his full agenda before his heart fails. Story 44. Have you seen The Death of Stalin? I think it is quite similar in terms of backstabbing and panicked attempts at positioning oneself for a power grab. Story 45. I do not know what it will look like, but yakety sax, also known as the Benny Hill theme, will be playing in the background. Story 46. I believe Vance will struggle to hold Make America Great Again together. His passive personality will make him a target. Donald Trump's aggressive demeanor and unusual charismatic personality have made him a hero of the uneducated working class. Vance is one of them, except he is a slick-talking, nerdy politician. They do not want to be led by him. They want to be led by someone who can say what they want without subtlety. This is my belief. I am not always right, but I often am. Story 47. I think it would be the biggest disaster your country has ever seen. As I understand it, Joseph R. Biden Jr. would be next in line, and that is like going from the frying pan into the fire. Next would be Michael Johnson, and I am not sure who wants to be a dictator more, him or Donald Trump. The rest on the list are inexperienced, incompetent, ignorant, racist, and sycophantic. If I were an American at this point, I would be very scared. Good luck to you all. Story 48. Reddit will shut down because there will be nothing left to discuss. Story 49. I see two scenarios. A JD Couch becomes president, but regardless, the foundation of this group is gone, and the entire Republican Party, this former political party now seen as a cult, is imploding and finished for good. The current Republican Party is nothing without Trump and cannot survive. B. It does not actually matter whether Couch has charisma or not, or who the next president would be, because the Republican Party does not plan to ever have legitimate elections any longer. They do not need the Make America Great Again base. They will just stay in power with the occasional fake election, similar to Russia. Story 50. There is no Republican Party or grand old party. It is now an oligarch Christian nationalist mafia-type crime syndicate. The dark powers behind it will come together and choose a new figurehead, just like they did with Ronald Reagan after Richard Nixon, and determine a path forward. In the light, those who think they are in control will fight for power, cheat to hold ground, and look for distractions. It has already begun. Story 51. My immediate concern is less about the overall power struggle and more about who immediately controls Vance's actions. If this happens before the next inauguration day, it means Vance, the puppet, becomes president. He is a weak-willed man and lacks the charisma to capture the base. However, he follows the orders of whoever he believes is powerful enough to advance him, and his track record with influencers is concerning. He does not need the cult if he immediately implements everything that former President Trump has not done, partly because Trump was tempered by his desires for wealth and adoration. Vance may not have the same limitations. Story 52. Vote out Republican Party. Guarding pedophiles, sex abusers, rapists, traumatizers, as well as bending laws to help them evade punishment. The Republican Party is a morally bankrupt institution. Rapists, extortionists, pedophiles, undermining, belittling, lying, immoral, complicit, authoritarian, narcissist. Story 53. Trump is a symptom of a greater illness. He is old and frail. They already have a plan for succession. There will be no power struggle. J.D. Vance will take over, and the Trump children will endorse him to appease the cult. Story 54. Vance takes over. After a few months of arguing, they fall in line like disciplined soldiers and proceed to finish Project 2025 as directed by his mentor Peter Thiel. Story 55. There would not be one. Vance would become president and people would follow him. The dramatic rhetoric would likely calm down, and people would stop acting so ridiculously. Story 56. I do not think there will be one. I think Donald Trump is literally a puppet on the stage, at least in his second term. I do not think he was so much during his first term, maybe a little, providing a smoke screen for everyone else backstage to get in place. If there is to be a power struggle, it already happened. Look at Liz Cheney as an example. Story 57. Hopefully, it would absolutely implode and we would never have to deal with a single Republican politician again. In a magical, perfect world, when he dies, every single conservative Republican person would go with him, and the world could finally begin to heal. However, Thanos is not real, and neither is magic, so we will be stuck with these hateful people. Story 58. It would be a ridiculous situation. However, Donald Trump will never die. He is likely having his organs replaced with organs taken from children at this moment. Story 59. Donald Trump is not the core problem. I hate to say it, but it is the people in this country. If someone like him can be voted in, then anyone can. Story 60. A lot will depend on the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party cannot regain status as the party of the working class, the Republican Party will continue to make small gains across the board. My hunch is that the next standard bearer of the Make America Great Again Republican Party will be a woman, which will further handicap the Democratic Party, who pride themselves on the illusion that they are the women's party. Look for a Haley/Ernst ticket in 2028. Story 61. Vance's fraudulent efforts will try to imitate Trump and fail miserably. Cannot wait. Story 62. JD does not have the charisma that Donald Trump has for the Make America Great Again movement. I hope it marks the decline of the Make America Great Again movement if Donald Trump leaves office. Story 63. The theocracy policy aspect of the grand old party will increase significantly, citing the need for God in government as the party's central focus. Story 64. There will be a serious fracture at the top. I cannot see his children not trying to grab power. Joe Biden does not have the cult of personality that Donald Trump does, so he will not be able to rally the support of Make America Great Again supporters as easily. Story 65. A free-for-all between the technology enthusiasts and the Christians? Story 66. If Donald Trump dies, the grand old party would splinter. Make America Great Again loyalists would fight over who inherits his base, likely Ron DeSantis, J.D. Vance, or even Donald Trump's children, while establishment Republicans would see an opening to regain influence, leading to a messy power struggle. Story 67. J.D. Vance will probably end up making Stephen Miller vice president and then resigning. Then Miller will make him vice president again. This is the only way for Vance to keep vacationing. Congress will go along because that is what they do. They are just in it for the benefits. Story 68. There are definitely going to be some conspiracy theories. Some will say he is not actually dead but has to fight pedophiles underground. Others will claim the Democrats killed him. I heard Joe Biden coded his desk with a delayed action poison that would take 8 months to activate after he left office. Story 69. The hardcore supporters of Make America Great Again are only loyal to the former president, not the party or the Constitution. I think that once he is finally gone, they will start fading away. Story 70. If he were to die in office, Vance obviously would become president. But given that he does not have the certain je quoi that Trump does, I think Make America Great Again and a healthy portion of the National Republican Party would start to fall apart. Once the fear factor wanes, we may return to something more akin to normalcy. Also, I don't see anyone on the horizon who could take Trump's place. Like it or not, Trump has an amazing talent to appeal to certain people in a way that is basically a cult of personality. Vance will be shamelessly backed by the big-name cryptocurrency, internet, and finance influencers, and that will be a turn-off to enough people that if he is the nominee, which he will likely be given the money behind him, he will lose. People think he is unappealing and a bad liar. Plus, Trump's ratings are already low because of the economy and immigration, his two signature issues. Story 71. Vance will be president when Donald Trump dies in late October. Story 72. There would be no struggle. They have had a plan for this all along. Donald J. Trump dying is part of the plan. You need to wake up and see what is happening. Story 73. I do not think the Make America Great Again crowd would embrace Vance. In the power vacuum left by Trump, the next leader of the Make America Great Again movement would probably be a podcaster who could get them riled up but not Alex Jones. Story 74. Vance will have a short run while tensions rise in the background as Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, and oligarchs choose their next incompetent leader. Vance will not be it, nor will most of the Fox TV commentators who were given administration positions. Frighteningly, the leaders may have cemented their rule enough with no more valid elections that it could be someone truly harmful like Stephen Miller. Story 75. Only the self-made individuals. People overestimate the position of a president. He is not a king or dictator, even if he wants to be one. Story 76. I do not know, but I hope it involves many of them killing each other over it. Story 77. Why do you ask? What do you know? Has something happened? Do I need to break out the champagne? Dear Lord, do not tease me. Story 78. There is already a line of succession for the President of the United States role. We also know that nothing Donald Trump is doing is his own. It is all the Heritage Foundation. Now, let us talk about the power struggle when that dies. Story 79. I do not know, but I cannot wait to watch them fight each other. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.